Hi, I'm Selina, and on the day that was supposed to be mine, my sister walked down the aisle in my dress to my song while my parents smiled and said, "Let her have it. She deserves more than you ever did." I didn't scream, I didn't fight, but what they didn't know was who my fiancé really was, and when she found out, she went white as the veil she stole. Before we dive in, what time are you listening to this and where from? Drop a comment below. This one, you won't forget. I used to think planning a wedding would feel joyful, like stitching a dream together with lace and care, but sitting at my kitchen table with ribbons tangled around my wrist and a glue gun long since cooled, I just felt tired. Not exhausted from work, though my hours at the nonprofit had been brutal, but something else. Something quieter. A dull ache in my gut that no list, no seating chart, no carefully packed welcome boxes could cover up. Julian had texted from the field earlier that morning. "Saw a sunrise over the ruins, thinking of you? Always thoughtful, always steady." And yet, his absence lately made the silence in our house ring a little louder than usual. I'd meant to call my mother last night, ask if she'd decided on which dress she wanted to wear. But the last time we spoke, her tone had been distracted, like she was answering from another room or another life. Still, I pressed on, addressing envelopes, stacking RSVP cards, brushing dust from the corners of old family expectations. By noon, I decided to take a break and walked out to the porch with a mug of black tea. Spring had finally shaken the frost off Massachusetts, tulips cracked open by the steps, and a pair of cardinals chattered in the neighbor's tree like they had somewhere better to be. That's when my phone buzzed. It was from my cousin Mara. No message, just a link. At first I assumed it was spam, until I saw the URL, Callista and Ethan tie thenot.com. I clicked. A soft piano melody played. Blossoms floated across the screen, and then, there it was. The venue, Meadow Hill Estate. The date, June 4th. The hosts, Mr. and Mrs. Gerard Mathis, my parents, and the bride, Callista, my little sister. I blinked. I looked again. My hand started trembling just slightly, enough to spill tea across my knee. 4 months ago, I'd introduced Callista to Ethan. He was a corporate donor who'd come to a gala I'd helped organize. She'd been visiting, breezing through my life in one of her expensive scarves, and I thought it might be nice to include her. Guess she liked what she saw. And apparently, so did he. For a full minute, I couldn't move, not even to breathe properly. The music on the site looped again. This time, it made my chest tighten. What twisted me up most wasn't even the fact that she was marrying him. It was the way the entire announcement had been staged like a royal decree, and I was nowhere in the picture, as if I never existed. I opened my recent call list and tapped my mother's name. Straight to voicemail. I tried again. Then my father. Then Callista. Nothing. Just when I was about to hurl my phone onto the porch railing, it buzzed again. Voicemail from Mom. "Hi, sweetie," her voice chirped, thin and rehearsed. "Look, I know this might be confusing, but let's not make it a competition, okay? You're older. You understand things better. This just made more sense for everyone. Let's keep things peaceful, all right?" Peaceful. I sat frozen on the porch for several minutes before dragging myself back inside. The world looked the same, but my skin didn't fit quite right anymore. By 5 p.m., I was parked in front of my parents' home, watching sunlight drip down the edge of their white porch swing. I rang the bell. The door opened before I finished my second knock. Callista, in a peach-wrap dress, barefoot, holding a glass of Chardonnay like she was hosting brunch. "Oh," she said, blinking like I'd arrived uninvited to my own house. "We didn't think you were still going ahead with yours." My ears rang. "You didn't think—" "We figured once Ethan and I set a date, you'd realize it was kind of awkward?" She tilted her head like she was helping me understand basic math. Behind her, I saw Mom walk in from the kitchen. Calm, perfectly made up, holding a tray of shrimp cocktail. "Selina," she said not unkindly, "you're being emotional. You've always been sensitive about these things, but honey, Ethan just has more standing. His family, well, you know. More standing. Like love was a corporate ladder, and I'd just worn the wrong shoes. I'm your daughter, I said. Mom smiled lightly, as if I'd made a joke she didn't quite find funny. Callista is too, she said. I turned. Walked down the steps, clutching the banister harder than I needed to. The late sun cast long shadows across their driveway, and I kept my gaze on the ground so no one could see my eyes well up. When I reached my car, I slid into the driver's seat and exhaled like I'd been holding my breath for years. In the passenger seat was a box of my wedding invitations, creamy cardstock, hand-pressed embossing, lilac ribbon. I pulled one out, ran my finger along the smooth edge, opened it. No names had been written in yet, just the template waiting for a life that no longer fit. Carefully, I folded it closed and placed it in the glove compartment. I didn't send mine, but I would attend hers. The parking lot was already full when I pulled up. I had to leave my car across the street, behind a row of hedges where the spring pollen clung to every surface. I sat there for a moment with the engine off, my hands resting on the steering wheel. The evening sun washed the windshield in gold, but I didn't feel warm. Not really. I hadn't RSVP'd. No one had asked, but I had paid the deposit for the venue, back when this day was supposed to be mine. The event staff didn't question me when I walked up the stone path toward the garden. Maybe they recognized me. Maybe they didn't care. Either way, the white archway at the entrance stood just as I had envisioned it, twinkling lights strung between the hedges, pale pink roses curling around the iron lattice. I had chosen this place, spent weekends with the coordinator picking color palettes and floral pairings, and now I was just an extra. Guests milled around, laughing over champagne flutes. Some looked at me with vague recognition. Others glanced, paused, then turned away. A woman near the bar leaned in to whisper something to her friend, while her eyes stayed fixed on me. I caught pieces of it. Wasn't this supposed to be? Followed by a shrug. Then laughter. I kept walking. The music changed, something soft and cinematic. A signal. Everyone began drifting toward the main patio. I followed, quietly slipping into the back of the crowd. No one greeted me. No one seemed surprised I was alone. From the platform, Callista stood radiant in white lace and silver heels that shimmered with every shift of her weight. Ethan stood beside her, jaw tight but smiling. They looked like a magazine cover. I waited for her to look my way. She didn't. A moment later, she tapped the mic. "Hi, everyone," she said sweetly. "I just want to thank you all for coming tonight. Your love and support mean the world to us, especially from family, those who opened doors for us, helped us step into the life we always wanted." She paused, then smiled wider. "Even those who almost got the date first." Laughter rippled through the crowd like a breeze, soft at first, then louder, and I saw it, my parents standing near the front. My mother laughed. My father shook his head with mock disapproval, grinning like it was all in good fun. I didn't move. Callista went on about destiny and how life realigns itself when the right people are meant to meet. Her voice sounded so polished, so practiced. She even held the mic the way a news anchor would, slightly to the side, poised, intentional. Then the slideshow began. A projector flickered on, casting light across the patio wall. Picture after picture flashed, her and Ethan standing by the lake, strolling under the gazebo, kissing beneath the same string lights I'd picked out with the venue planner 8 months ago. Captions popped up like greeting cards. The perfect pair, the perfect place, the perfect time. People clapped, some even awed. I backed away one step at a time until the stone path led me out of the crowd, past the fountain, through the rose-lined side gate. I stepped out onto the gravel lot behind the estate. The noise dimmed behind me, muffled by distance and walls. There was no breeze, just still air and the hum of the generator near the catering truck. I pulled out my phone, no texts, no calls. Julian was still at the research site out west. I'd told him not to worry, that I'd handle everything fine on my own. That had been 3 days ago. The sky was beginning to darken, fading from coral to bruised lavender. I looked down at my shoes, cream block heels I'd bought for my own rehearsal dinner. It had never happened. And this wasn't mine either. But I had shown up anyway. I thought for a second that maybe someone would notice I was gone, that someone, anyone, might step outside and ask where I'd gone. But no one did. No one noticed I'd left. I slipped quietly back through the hedges toward my car, one hand against my side, as if to keep myself from spilling open. Inside, I sat for a moment with the door still ajar, listening to the faint music drift through the garden trees. It sounded like something from a romantic drama. Beautiful. Removed. Someone else's scene. I started the engine and pulled away from the curb. The road back toward my place wound through old neighborhoods and rows of dogwood trees in bloom. For a stretch, I drove in silence. Then my phone buzzed. Aunt Carolyn. She rarely texted. She still used a flip phone, last I checked. You've always been too nice, Selina. But they crossed the line. Below it, an image. I pulled over near a corner bakery, parked beneath a dim street lamp, and tapped the photo. A blurry contract, scribbled signatures. But I recognized mine, and Julian's, and below it, in careful script, Callista's name. I didn't drive home, not right away. After the text from Aunt Carolyn, I sat parked beneath that dim street lamp for what felt like hours. I must have read the image 10 times, zoomed in, zoomed out, adjusted the brightness on my screen, but it didn't change what I saw. There it was, my full name, spelled correctly, middle initial and all, on a document I had never seen before, next to Julian's, and then hers, Callista's. A form labeled Relinquishment of Bridal Contract and Property Deposit Rights. It looked official, drafted, formatted, notarized, but none of it was mine. I drove home sometime after 2 a.m, though I barely remember the drive. Just the glow of gas stations, the buzz of late-night radio static, the occasional pair of headlights passing the other way. At home, I didn't go upstairs. I sat in the living room, on the edge of the couch, with a glass of water that remained untouched. The house was still, too quiet, like it had swallowed its own voice. I reopened the image. Again. Who submitted this? When? How? My thumb hovered over Julian's contact. I wanted to forward the picture, ask if he knew anything. But what could he possibly say? He'd been gone for weeks, deep in his fieldwork in Arizona, and even if he hadn't, I wasn't ready to hear what I feared might be true. I stayed awake through sunrise. When the birds began calling and the kitchen filled with soft light, I pulled out the drawer where I kept our wedding contracts. The original deposit receipt was still there. My name, my card, my signature, dated 7 months ago. But now it looked like that never mattered. I Googled the law firm listed on the form, Weathers & Klein, just 20 minutes away. I didn't shower, just threw on jeans, pulled my hair into a bun, and drove straight there with the printout of the image in hand. At the front desk, a young receptionist glanced up from her computer. "Can I help you?" "I need to speak with someone about this." I slid the photo across the counter. "There's been a mistake." She studied it. Her eyes flicked up to mine. "One moment." She disappeared into a hallway. I waited, arms crossed, heart pounding like a slow drumbeat in my ears. A few minutes later, a tall man in a gray vest and navy tie walked out. He looked to be in his mid-50s, with the kind of calm face you see in commercials for retirement plans. "I'm Garrett Klein," he said, extending his hand. "Please come in." His office smelled faintly of leather and paper. A shelf behind his desk was lined with thick binders and plaques with phrases like, "Ethics matter and your word is your bond." I sat down, hands still clenched. "I understand you have concerns about a document filed through our office?" I nodded. "This one." I handed him the printed image. "It has my name on it, but I didn't sign it." He studied it, then turned to his screen, typed something, and clicked through a few files. "Yes, this came through about 6 weeks ago. It was digitally notarized. Let me pull it up in full." When he turned the monitor toward me, I saw a clean PDF. Everything looked polished, clean, like it had gone through all the proper channels, but I hadn't even known it existed. "This form was submitted electronically," Garrett said, "with digital verification. It was vouched for by 2 family members, one of them listed as—" He paused. "Miriam Mace. My mother." I felt the heat rise in my chest. "So anyone can submit a form, say it's from me, and you just approve it?" Garrett straightened. "We do require identity verification. In this case, the document was accessed from an IP address linked to your family's home, and per policy, family endorsements are sometimes considered, particularly if the assets in question are domestic or familial." He stopped, seeing my face, which I realize now perhaps should have been reconsidered. I leaned in. "I never signed that. I never saw it. 6 weeks ago, I was building party favors for a rehearsal that never happened." His expression shifted. Not guilt, not quite concern, more like discomfort, like he knew this was going to become a problem. "I'm not accusing your office of anything," I said quietly, "but I want a copy, a full one, and I want the name of whoever uploaded the form." He nodded slowly. "I'll get that for you." He left the room, and as I sat there alone, a memory crept in. 6 weeks ago, Sunday afternoon. I was folding napkins and printing menus in my kitchen while Callista clicked through my shared wedding folder on her tablet. She'd asked me to confirm a couple of delivery forms, said something like, "Just hit submit when you're done. These vendors are impossible if you're late." I'd barely looked, trusted her. She had been sipping white wine and smiling as she handed me the screen. I remember clicking. Just once. Back then, I thought I was confirming the cake flavors. Now I realized I'd been signing myself out of my own wedding. Garrett returned with a manila folder and slid it across the desk. "I'll email you the digital version as well," he said, not meeting my eyes. "But you should know, the original submission raised a few questions. I voiced them, but your parents insisted it was a family matter, that it would be resolved privately." I opened the folder. There it was, the form. Clean, crisp, and completely false. Still, I kept my voice steady. "Thank you for your time." I stood, folder in hand, and walked out through the lobby. Outside, the afternoon had grown hot. A breeze rustled the flag on the pole out front, but the air felt thick. I got in my car, shut the door, stared straight ahead, and finally said it out loud. Soft, but certain. I didn't lose it. They took it. I drove straight home from the law office, folder still sitting in the passenger seat like it weighed 100 pounds. I didn't even take my shoes off when I got inside, just dropped my keys into the bowl, sat down at the edge of the couch, and stared at the copy of the form Garrett had given me. Every name on it was familiar, and yet the entire document felt like it belonged to someone else's story, someone who'd been erased cleanly, without permission. A few hours later, as I was making tea, my phone buzzed. "Mom, we're having a small family dinner. You should come. Let's clear the air. No apology, no explanation, just clear the air." I let the message sit there for a while, watching the steam rise from my mug. Then, not even 10 minutes later, another text came in. "Dad, it's time we stop this nonsense. Be here Saturday. 4:30. My father hadn't texted me since February, and now, suddenly, they both wanted me back under their roof. I didn't reply. Not right away, but something in me said I needed to go. Not to make peace, not to forgive, but to see what they were really planning. Saturday came. I parked 2 houses down, walked slowly up the path. Their front door was already open, the smell of rosemary chicken and sweet potatoes drifting out like bait. Inside, the dining room table was set with the good china. Wine glasses gleamed under the pendant light, napkins folded like they were expecting a holiday, and Callista was already there, sitting on the left, her long legs crossed, a soft pink cardigan draped over her shoulders like she was auditioning for sainthood. Mom stood near the stove, humming. Dad was slicing bread. Romy sat off to the side, half glancing at her phone but not typing anything. Her hair looked rushed, like she'd come at the last second. I stepped into the room. No one rushed to greet me. Just polite nods like I was a neighbor they hadn't seen in a while. Mom raised her glass. to our future daughter-in-law, and to healing the family." Callista smiled sweetly. Too sweet, the kind that coats poison. I didn't raise my glass. I just sat. Dinner passed in silence and small talk. What used to be family updates had been reduced to comments about weather, new furniture, and Callista's favorite bridal magazines. Romy didn't speak. Halfway through the meal, my father wiped his mouth, leaned back, and reached behind him for a manila folder. "I think it's time we talk business," he said. He placed the folder in front of me. "We reviewed the accounts, Selina, and we're a bit confused." I didn't touch it. I just looked at him. He went on, like this was a board meeting. "It seems you used our family's financial support to secure a second venue, one that wasn't on the agreed-upon list." I blinked. "What are you talking about?" Dad tapped the folder. "The deposit, the change in property designation. It doesn't align with the timeline we had." Mom chimed in. "We only found out last week, and honestly, it feels like a breach of trust." Callista tilted her head, mock concerned. "It's not about blame, it's about transparency." They were flipping the script, and doing it well. I opened the folder. Inside were printed screenshots of the digital form from Garrett's office, highlighted and annotated like a high school project. They had built a narrative, one where I had gone rogue, signed away property rights, and tried to orchestrate a venue swap behind everyone's back. "You've always been impulsive," Mom said gently, as if that would soften the blow. "Maybe this is a lesson in humility." My jaw tightened. "Does a lesson? As if I were a child, not the person who funded half of this wedding." I closed the folder. "I didn't sign anything," I said flatly. "Not knowingly, and you all know that." My father's face hardened. "It was your email, your name. The lawyer confirmed it." I looked at him. "And who vouched for it? Who pushed it through without confirming with me?" No one answered. I turned to Callista. "You had access to everything. The folders, the digital forms." She didn't deny it. She just smiled and said, "You signed. I just finalized." It hit like a slap without contact. Cold. Practiced. She didn't even flinch. I stood. "If I speak now," I said, calmly but clearly, "none of you will walk away with a clean name." My mother's face fell, ever so slightly. Not because of guilt, because control was slipping. I turned toward Romy. She still hadn't looked at me directly. "You knew," I said softly. "You saw it happen." Her eyes met mine. Just for a second. Then she looked away. No denial. I didn't wait for dessert. I picked up my bag, nodded once, and walked toward the door. As I stepped outside, I heard my father mutter behind me, "She always did have a flair for drama." But I didn't respond. I just kept walking, and as I reached the end of the sidewalk, I whispered, "Not for them, but for me. I won't play victim, but I won't be quiet either." The wind outside was picking up when I stepped out of their house. It rustled the oak trees along the sidewalk like they were whispering warnings I should have heard years ago. I didn't drive home right away. I pulled into a grocery store parking lot, turned off the engine, and just sat there for a while. Window cracked, headlights off. My fingers clenched around the steering wheel like I was holding back a scream. But I didn't scream. I went home. It was close to midnight when I finally walked into my apartment. No lights on, no TV humming, just the dull tick of the clock above my bookshelf and the glow from the street lamp outside, cutting a long stripe across my floor. I dropped my keys on the counter and stared at the wedding binder still sitting on the side table. I hadn't opened it in days. It used to be full of color, fabric swatches, vendor notes, Callista's sticky notes in pastel pinks and blues. Now it looked like a tombstone. I sat down slowly, not because I was tired, but because my body didn't know what to do with itself anymore. Everything felt heavy. Then their voices started echoing in my head again. "You've always been impulsive. It's just paperwork. It's a lesson in humility." I pressed the heels of my hands into my eyes, trying to silence the noise. But it was louder than anything in this apartment, and then, without meaning to, my mind took me back. I was 13. Same living room, Same dim light. I had just come home from a school play, still wearing the costume I'd helped sew myself. My mother looked me up and down, nose wrinkled, and said, "It's second-hand, isn't it? Honestly, Selina, you look like a church donation." Romy had laughed. Dad didn't say anything. I remembered that silence more than the words. That night, I folded the dress carefully and hid it under my bed. And now, decades later, it felt like I was still trying to fold myself small so they wouldn't notice just how much I remembered. I stood up, walked to my desk, pulled out the filing box where I kept every savings statement, contract, and document related to the wedding, flipped through them. Slowly at first, then faster. That's when I saw it. A shared planning document, one Callista had emailed me back in February. We'd been talking vendors and timelines. I scrolled to the comment section, and there it was. In Callista's handwriting, highlighted in yellow like she hadn't even cared to hide it. "Use her name. It's just paperwork. She won't check." I froze. I stared at that sentence for maybe a full minute. Then I closed the laptop. No anger, not yet. Just that stillness that comes when something inside you quietly snaps. They never thought I'd check, or remember, or speak. Well, they were wrong. I grabbed my phone, opened the voice memo app, sat upright, spine straight like I was back in a courtroom, and then I hit record. "Hi, Mom," I said. My voice was steady, calm, too calm. "This isn't a misunderstanding, it's a pattern, and I see it clearly now." I paused, then leaned in closer, like she could hear the years I swallowed. "You've gotten used to my silence, to the way I keep peace while you rewrite the truth." A breath, not shaky, intentional. "But this time, if it happens again, I'll respond, publicly, loudly." My thumb hovered, then tapped stop. I listened to it once, then sent it. Not as a text, as a voice message, because I wanted her to hear the tone. No yelling, no drama, just certainty. 10 minutes passed, no reply. I didn't expect one. I was about to shut down the computer when there was a soft knock at my door. I froze. Another knock. I walked over, looked through the peephole. Romy. I opened it without a word. He looked like he hadn't slept. He walked in, stood near the counter, rubbing the back of his neck. "I know it's late." I nodded toward the kettle. "Want tea?" He shook his head. I couldn't sleep. I sat on the edge of the couch. "So now you talk?" He didn't fight it. He just sat, too, elbows on knees. "I should have said something at dinner," he muttered. I looked at him. "But you didn't." He nodded, eyes down. "They threatened to cut me out." I didn't even blink. "You think they'd cut you out? I've lived cut out." He looked up. There was nothing defensive in his face, just guilt. The kind that simmers when you know you didn't fight for the one person who always did for you. "I was scared," he said. "I used to be too," I replied quietly. "But scared people don't survive in this family. Only quiet ones do. Until they don't." He opened his mouth, but I stood up. "You should go," I said, not unkindly. "I need sleep, and you need to decide who you are when no one's watching." He walked to the door, hesitated. "Selina," he said, voice low. "What if it gets worse?" I met his eyes. It already did. As he left, I closed the door softly behind him, then turned back toward the kitchen, pulled the laptop open again. Because something told me, I thought a warning would stop them. I didn't expect what they did next. I barely slept, just enough to feel the drag of morning, but not enough to forget the words I'd spoken the night before, or the silence that followed them. I got up just after 6. The light through the curtains was gray and thin, the kind of colorless morning that makes everything feel suspended in time. I turned on the kettle, opened my laptop, and saw the number in red blinking at the corner of my inbox. 5 unread emails, all from the HOA. I clicked the first one. Subject, questionable use of community space. Message, concerns have been raised about your behavior during recent family events in shared property zones. We ask that you refrain from using these areas for personal disputes. The next one was worse. Subject, Concerns about emotional behavior. Message. Several anonymous reports suggest episodes of emotional volatility during family gatherings. These raise questions about your suitability for public-facing roles within the HOA committee. I blinked hard, read it again, and then I just sat there, coffee growing cold in my hand. Emotional volatility? They were painting me as unstable. I clicked through the rest, all in the same tone. Accusations wrapped in fake concern, anonymous complaints with phrases like appeared aggressive, yelled at guests, disrupted community decorum. No names, no signatures, just digital knives. And I knew. I didn't have to guess. This wasn't from random neighbors, Callista, or worse, my mother. Maybe both. I logged into the HOA portal. My hands were steady now, but my stomach had that low, twisting knot, the kind that used to hit me in grade school before a presentation. Except this time the bullies weren't classmates. They were blood. There it was. Under Community Concerns, a submission labeled Video Evidence, March HOA Dinner Incident. I clicked and watched. Someone had taken footage from our family dinner, cherry-picked and edited. It started mid-conversation, cut to me standing, mid-sentence, then zoomed in just as I reached for my bag and said, "You want silence? You'll get it." No context, no lead-up, just drama. They made me look like I'd stood up and threatened them, and now they were filing this under community decorum? I called Diane, the HOA chair. She answered on the second ring. "Selina," she said, voice too careful. "I figured you'd call." I didn't waste time. "That video is cut. You know it's cut." She sighed. "Look, there's been pressure. Some feel you've brought tension into the HOA atmosphere." "Tension? Or truth?" "I'm just saying," she said, voice low. "The board is reconsidering your eligibility for the upcoming election. Some don't want division." "Division only happens," I said slowly, "when you protect lies." She was silent. "Thanks for your time," I said, and hung up. I sat back, exhaled. My eyes landed on the little black camera tucked into the corner of my apartment, security I'd installed last year after a break-in scare. It ran constantly, even at family dinners, and I had the raw footage. I pulled up the home security app, clicked through to the date of the dinner. It was all there, from the first toast to the final exit. No splicing, no dramatics, just facts. I downloaded the file, then opened my email. By the way, into HOA board subject, submission, clarification of events. Dear Board, in light of the recent edited submission regarding my conduct, I respectfully request that this full, uncut footage be reviewed. I believe it offers context missing from the current narrative. Should the board deem appropriate, I also request the previous video be removed from official records. Thank you, Selina Marin. I attached the file. Hit send, and let it go. I didn't pace. I didn't second guess. I closed the laptop and stepped onto the patio. The sun had finally come up. The neighborhood looked the same, but it didn't feel the same. Because once you see who's willing to lie about you to protect their image, you stop giving them space in your silence. I pulled out my phone. There were no new messages from my mother. Good. I opened a blank text and typed, "You wanted control. What you've done is help me find my voice." I sent it. No emojis. No follow-up. Then I opened the HOA portal again. Scrolled to the bottom. Submit nomination. I hovered my cursor. And clicked. Whatever came next, at least this time I was walking in eyes open. Because apparently that submission made me dangerous. So they upped their game. The morning of the HOA meeting, the air was already humming with tension. Not the loud kind, but the quiet, slick sort you feel when you walk into a room and the talking stops a beat too early. The meeting hall wasn't packed, but the people who mattered were already in their seats. Faces turned, lips tight, eyes pretending not to look directly at me. I walked in with my head held level, not high, not low, just steady. Diane barely met my eyes as she adjusted the microphone stand. I took my seat at the second row, one chair left empty beside me. The other committee candidates sat in a cluster to the right, Callista dead center, in pale pink and pearls, her expression polished but eyes twitching just a little too much to pass for relaxed. I didn't have to wait long. "We've had a late addition to the agenda," Diane said, clearing her throat. "One of the community members has submitted a petition concerning candidate behavior." She didn't name me. She didn't have to. The whispering started before the paper even left the folder. Callista stood. "I wouldn't do this if I didn't feel unsafe," she said, her voice breaking right on cue. "But last month, at a family event, Selina publicly harassed me, in front of my children." I didn't blink. I didn't move. "She cornered me, raised her voice, made me feel—" She paused for dramatic effect. "Unfit to raise a family." Someone behind me coughed uncomfortably. Diane looked unsure. "There's also a blog," she continued, "submitted anonymously." She opened a laptop and turned the screen toward the room. My chest tightened. It was mine. Old. From years ago. Back when I was unpacking grief after Dad died. Before I'd locked that kind of writing away. It was my voice, my words. Raw, exposed, pulled from a private blog I hadn't touched since 2016. Lines read aloud like evidence in a trial. There are days I don't recognize myself in the mirror. Sometimes I still hear her voice, even when she's not there. I don't know if I'm enough, and I hate that I care. They were using my therapy journal to make me sound unstable. People shifted in their seats. Not many met my eyes now. Callista looked directly at me. Her lips curved slightly. She thought this would break me, but I just folded my hands in my lap and waited for them to finish. When Diane asked if I wanted to respond, I stood slowly. No rush, no show. "Thank you," I said into the mic. My voice was even. "I'd like to clarify a few things." I reached into my tote bag, pulled out a flash drive. "This," I said, "is the uncut footage of the dinner Callista just described, from the security camera in my dining room. Not edited, not spliced, no dramatic music." There was a pause as Diane accepted the drive and passed it to the tech assistant. The screen behind us flickered to life. I stepped aside and let the footage speak. There I was, opening the door, offering drinks, pouring wine, smiling, trying, then the shift. Callista's tone sharpening, my mother's interjections, the tension thickening, and then me, standing, calmly placing my napkin on the table. "You want silence? You'll get it." No yelling, no threat, just a woman pushed too far for too long. The room didn't breathe. When the video ended, I walked back to the microphone. "I have no interest in destroying anyone," I said, "but I won't let anyone rewrite the truth either." I pulled a small square from my folder, paper, neatly folded. It was a napkin. From the original engagement dinner Callista had planned, the one I was told I was too unbalanced to attend. The napkin was embossed, folded like a leaf with gold edges. I placed it gently on the table in front of me. Then I turned to the audience. Julian was there. In the back. He'd been silent for weeks. I didn't say his name. I didn't have to. He looked at the napkin, then at me, then down. The room was still quiet when he stood. "I was wrong," he said, his voice rasping slightly. "I was wrong to let them do this to you, to pretend I didn't see it happening." He didn't say more. He didn't need to. Callista stood abruptly, her face drained. "This is a witch hunt," she hissed. "You can't let her manipulate you like this. She's unstable. She has a history." Diane raised her hand, calm but firm. "Callista, your nomination is now under review. We'll inform you of the board's decision within the week." Callista's mouth opened, closed. She grabbed her purse and stormed out, heels clacking on the tile like a slow drumbeat of defeat. I didn't gloat. I just gathered my things, spoke to no one, and walked out. The sun had dipped lower by the time I pulled into my driveway. The light filtered through the trees in that golden hush that only happens right before the world goes dim. There was something on my porch. A bouquet, not extravagant. Simple, sunflowers and white daisies wrapped in brown paper. No card, but tucked underneath was a napkin, folded like a leaf. I stood there for a while. I didn't cry. I just breathed. Because that's the thing they never tell you about finding your voice. It's not loud. It's not angry. It's just yours. And you don't need anyone to clap for it. I'd just returned from the post office. Nothing special, just a few bills and a grocery flyer, when I saw the envelope sitting in my mailbox, heavier than the others, with that unmistakable red sticker, certified mail, signature required. I signed for it, thanked the carrier with a tired nod, and walked back inside. The minute I slid the letter opener through the seam, I knew it wasn't going to be good. From HOA Legal Counsel. Subject: Emergency hearing notification and allegation of fraudulent deed filing. I read it once, then again. My coffee sat untouched on the counter, cooling fast. Apparently someone had filed a formal complaint claiming I'd forged documents, specifically the deed to the house. According to them, I falsified signatures and illegally filed ownership under my name. They even attached evidence. I didn't even need to scroll far before I saw it. A low-res photo of me holding the title packet from years ago. Julian had taken it himself when we'd first closed on the home. Now it was being shared out of context online, circulating on one of those gossip boards that feeds off suburban drama. Someone had added a caption beneath it. How do you inherit a home your fiancé never even signed over? By that night, I stopped checking my phone altogether. I didn't sleep much. The emergency board meeting was set for 3 p.m. the next day. I showed up early. The boardroom was colder than usual. Or maybe that was just me. A fan whirred low in the corner, and the air had that mix of Lysol and tension. Callista arrived 10 minutes after I did, with her lawyer. She wore navy, not pink this time. Serious, polished, confident. The chairwoman gave us both polite nods before clearing her throat. We've convened due to new allegations regarding property ownership, she began. Callista, if you'd like to present your evidence. Her lawyer did the talking, copies of a supposed alternate deed that showed Julian as sole owner. An affidavit from one of Julian's cousins swearing he always knew the home would go to Callista eventually. And more printouts from that gossip thread, nothing legally binding, just enough to rattle nerves. I let them finish. I waited until the folder hit the table, then I stood. I figured this was coming, I said calmly, which is why I brought this. From my tote bag, I pulled out a leather document folder, slightly worn at the edges but still solid. I opened it slowly, deliberately. This is the original deed, signed by Julian Anders, dated 2 weeks before he passed. Witnessed, notarized. I walked to the table and laid it down, right beside their stack. A pause. I also have an email thread, I continued, from Callista herself, back when she needed help covering her mortgage. She wrote, and I quote, "We both know it was never really your house, but if you can help me now, maybe I'll keep my mouth shut about the will." Gasps rippled around the room. Her attorney shot her a sharp glance, but I wasn't finished. "One more thing," I said, pulling a smaller envelope from my folder. "This was found among Julian's papers. It's a letter, from his father, addressed to me, not Callista, not even Julian's mother." I unfolded the single sheet. The boardroom was dead silent. "Selina, if anything ever happens to Julian, I want you to know this home is yours, not because of paperwork, because I trust you to guard what matters in it." The HOA president took the letter from my hand, read it, looked over the envelope, verified the date. When she finally spoke, her voice had changed. "This board finds no evidence of fraudulent ownership," she said. "In fact, it appears the complainant's materials were misleading at best." Callista's lips moved, but no sound came out. "You can't be serious," she finally managed. "You're just going to ignore everything I—" "Ms. Anders," the president interrupted, "your committee eligibility is officially rescinded, effective immediately." Callista stood up so fast her chair scraped against the floor. "You'll hear from my lawyer," she snapped. "All of you!" She grabbed her things in a huff and stormed out, her heels echoing down the hallway like a warning shot. Julian sat in the back row. He didn't speak, didn't defend her, didn't even look at me. I don't remember much after that, just that I gathered my documents, thanked the board, and walked out the front doors of the courthouse lobby into the late afternoon light. It was bright, cloudless, too cheerful for what had just unfolded. My hands were trembling by the time I reached the bottom step. I paused on the sidewalk, reached into my bag, and finally turned my phone back on. The notifications came flooding in, but only one caught my eye. A message from Julian. Julian, I never wanted it to go this far. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. I swiped left and hit delete. Whatever he never wanted, he'd let happen anyway. But later that night, I found something in the attic, and everything I thought I knew about him, about her, about myself, shifted. I didn't want to be in the house that night. Every room felt heavier than it had in years, like the walls themselves had been listening, absorbing every silence I'd swallowed for the sake of peace. But I wasn't ready to sleep, and I didn't want to sit in the living room, staring at old photos that no longer smiled back the same way. So I climbed the narrow attic stairs, the wood creaking like it hadn't been stepped on in a decade. There was no real reason, just a pull. Something quiet in me said, "Look where you haven't looked." The attic was still dusty and dim, the single bulb flickering for a few seconds before settling into a weak yellow glow. I ducked beneath a low beam and crouched behind the old paint cans and leftover tiles from a renovation Julian never got around to, and that's when I saw it, a box I didn't recognize, flat, taped closed with fading blue painter's tape. It wasn't labeled, just tucked behind a stack of insulation foam like someone had intentionally hidden it. I brought it down carefully, set it on the floorboards, and peeled the tape. Inside, there were cards. Dozens of them. Birthday wishes in Romy's unmistakable cursive, photos of us in younger years, silly notes on grocery receipts, all saved, folded, held onto like little pieces of breath. And then, on top of the stack, was something I'd never seen before. An invitation. Cream cardstock, silver embossed, elegant. My name was printed on the front, Miss Selina Ray. It was a wedding invitation. Our wedding. Addressed to me, but never sent. I turned it over, confused. There, in Julian's handwriting, was a line that stopped my breath cold. "I wanted to surprise you with something perfect, but maybe you would have just wanted honesty." My knees bent slowly, and I sat back against the attic wall, holding the card in both hands. It wasn't about the paper. It was the weight of what could have been, and what he thought I wanted. Julian had tried to design a fairy tale, and in doing so, he'd ignored the one thing I'd asked for. A real life, built on truth, not secrets dressed in ribbon. I stayed like that for a long time, just breathing in the smell of dust and cardboard and time. Then I noticed a smaller envelope, almost wedged into the fold of the invitation. This one had no stamp, no return address, just my name. I opened it with a finger, slowly. Inside was a tiny, folded note, handwritten, not typed. Different ink, different energy. Romy's. "You were always enough. I knew she would try to break you. I'm glad you didn't let her." I blinked hard. My fingers trembled slightly. And then I noticed, taped delicately to the bottom of the note, a single pressed dogwood petal. The exact kind Romy wore in her hair at what should have been my bridal shower. The one Callista ruined with her drunken toast and sideways comments. That petal had been saved. It hit me then. Romy had mailed this to herself, or left it here. For me, for someday, for when I'd be alone and need to remember. I didn't cry right away. I just sat there, holding the note, reading those 3 lines again and again, not for answers, but for permission to forgive myself. Later, I brought the box down with me. I made tea, sat on the porch while the neighborhood slowly dimmed. Porch lights flickered on one by one. A couple walked by with their dog, waved politely. I waved back. For the first time in months, my chest didn't feel tight. I didn't need anyone to apologize anymore. I just needed to let go of the idea that they ever would. The next morning, I walked down to the little park on the edge of the neighborhood, the one with the wooden benches and that tiny lake where ducks always seem to gather, no matter the season. I sat near the weeping willow, breathed, thought about Romy, about her quiet ways of loving people, about how she never shouted her loyalty, but she always showed up. I thought about Julian, about how he tried, failed, and left a trail of paper apologies he was too scared to deliver, and I thought about me, what I'd kept, what I'd let go. Sometimes healing isn't loud, it's not revenge or a courtroom win. Sometimes it's reading a forgotten note in your attic and remembering who you were before they tried to rewrite you. I reached into my bag and took out the dogwood petal. I didn't press it back into the box. I didn't put it away. I let it rest in my palm, fragile, faded, but still whole, and I smiled.